Hello, class. So, last time we were talking about the revolution finally getting underway, and it ended with King Louis XVI having his head chopped off. Okay, and it was a danger to keep him alive. He was trying to escape, collude with his brother in law to have Austria invade. So, this is going to be impetus for the War of the First Coalition. So these revolutionary wars are going to continue until later after Napoleon is in charge. And so most of Europe declares war on France. We have Great Britain, Spain, Portugal, Prussia, Austria, and the Holy Roman Empire. Technically, when this starts off, Louis is still the king, but this is really what's going to push into this. And it's sort of a miracle that France survives this because they have a lot of internal struggles and some pretty obvious external struggles. All of Europe declaring war is a big distraction for you. So that's just what's kind of going on in the background here. We're going to talk about all of the internal struggles. So the king is going to have his head cut off. And at that point, he's just called Citizen Louis. Okay, because he's not considered better than anyone else. And when it comes to what people most associate this with, and is Maximilien Robespierre. Okay? If people think about the negative aspects of the French Revolution, okay, of the Reign of Terror, they think of Maximilien Robespierre. And he was the head of the left-wing coalition in the National Assembly, but he wasn't in the majority. Yeah, he's going to functionally run the country, and that is because of this group, the Committee on Public Safety. These guys are going to end up being de facto the executive branch of the country, where they are going to be able to put people on trial and set them for death. So we get to this idea of the Reign of Terror. Okay, the Committee of Public Safety prosecutes anyone who's suspected of undermining the revolution. You have kind of these kangaroo courts of these revolutionary tribunals determining guilt and punishment. So 300,000 people will be arrested, 40,000 will be killed. A lot of this is happening in Paris itself. There are parts of France that are relatively untouched by this reign of terror. But the thing is, anyone that's questioned about undermining the revolution can be put on here. So it's a bit of a witch trial setup. Because if you say, well, Rook's here, I'm not so sure this is the best idea, he could say something like, well, that sounds like something an enemy of the revolution would say. Obvious implicit threat. Right? And so a lot of people going after that are monarchist. Right? But you're going up for all sides. So we have these guillotines. Set up these big public executions. There's been a lot of psychology stuff, sociology about these public murders. So the Reign of Terror is going to continue. However, it's going to eventually end in a somewhat ironic way, which is Robespierre will be turned upon and he will be killed. And so things are going to become a bit more calm right after that occurs. Now, as I said before, there are these big reactions against everything that was associated with the old regime. They wanted to change everything. Right? And so, a big thing that Robespierre was after was a thing called the cult of the supreme being. So, there aren't the negative connotations of the word cult when translated into French as there is in English. Basically, it's anything that's religion. Okay? And so, we have the cult of the supreme being that is a form of deism set up by Maximilien Robespierre. So it's to be the new state religion of France and replace Roman Catholicism. And it's pretty weird. Okay? I don't try to be too judgmental about various religions, but there is a almighty high power, but it's not God. And Robespierre is one that was more into it. Later, it gets replaced with the cult of reason. And that is something that sometimes surprised people because it was like, what was the first country to have state-sponsored atheism? And it's France during the French Revolution. Okay. And here is that state-sponsored atheism. They are going to have state-sponsored attacks on the church. Okay? It's a miracle that, like, Notre Dame survived. And so, again, this is going to be the big negative reaction because they're against everything that was associated with the old regime. This includes the calendar. Okay? The calendar was an old Christian Catholic calendar. They used the Gregorian calendar. So what are they going to do? They're going to set up their own calendar that they're always looking back to ancient Greece and Rome. So you get these things that are all based around in Latin. So you get Vendémiaire, Brumaire, Thermidor, Fructidor. And this new calendar is all associated with various elements of nature that somewhat go around with this. So, Nivos is snow. It's December 21st, January 19th. It's probably the most likely time for there to be snow. Right? Messidor is when the harvest is, all this type of things. And some of these big events are going to be named after what in the new Republican calendar that was occurring. They have decimal time. So the day was divided into 10 decimal hours, and each hour had 100 decimal minutes. And each minute had 100 decimal seconds. So there's 100,000 decimal seconds in a day. So a decimal second is roughly 0.864 regular second. So there are roughly 69 of these decimal seconds in our regular minute. Okay, so that calendar, decimal time, these things don't continue through. You know what still is around today? The metric system. All right. Which is designed here. Again, just like decimal time, it's all base 10. It's going against the old imperial measurements that were used in the old regime. Right. And so when Robespierre is defeated, you get the Thermidorian reaction. And this is simply because it happens during Thermidor. And so this is a counter-reaction to what was happening during the Reign of Terror, where after you had the far left, you're going to get the right coming in here. And part of this is that they simply never established a peaceful transition of power. after the left in France had suppressed the right by violence and terror with Thermidorian action, we're going to see the left suppressed by brutal force going through here. But eventually, probably the most stable of the revolutionary governments coming out is going to be the Directory, where we have 5 different guys that are going to be involved together for the executive branch. And you can see Carnot still managing to be a survivor here. So the Directory is a 5-person executive branch, and they each took turns being the one in charge. And you needed 3 to agree on any action. And so a new director was swapped out every year, and it's supposed to be chosen by chance, by casting lots. And there are pros and cons to this. That since you only need a majority of them there, if you can kind of make a clique of 3 people, you can basically run it. It is supposed to be done by random chance who's going to be the leader at the time, but it wasn't because they're all scheming. And again, when I mentioned in another video about how people were all upset about how things were, but they had different reactions. So you are going to see a thing where in the Terror, you have a secular left-wing government that was repressing religion and repressing the political rights and monarchists. Thermidorian reaction, where the left is now being repressed politically. But you still have this cult of reason, this atheistic cult, in a country that had been a pretty devout Catholic country. So we get the war in the Vendée, where the most Catholic and the most monarchy sympathetic region of France is going to rebel. And it's going to have to be put down by force. Now, the culmination of this is an event called 13 Vendémiaire, in which a monarchist mob that is demanding the return of the monarchy and the end of the revolution are going into Paris. And the Directory are all panicked. So what do? They get someone out of house arrest. A guy called Napoleon. And they say, can you finish this? And he does. And he uses cannons to murder the protesters and put this down. And Napoleon's getting his own video. But eventually, the Directory is going to end with the coup of 18 Brumaire, November 9th, 1799, in which Napoleon and his brother Lucien are going to work with the Directory to essentially seize power in France. He'll become first consul, later emperor, and the revolution's essentially over. But you can see kind of the chaos that happens with it, where there's these back and forth. And no one ever wants to give up power and have these peaceful transition of power, because the moment you're out of power, you are going to be massacred and repressed by your foreign political enemies. It makes the United States during this time look quite good in comparison when we weren't having this type of reaction in our political system. So next time I will talk about the first consul himself, one Napoleon Bonaparte.